Hello, and welcome to Painters Motivating Painters Reviews for the month of February 2025. I'd like to start out with a big thank you to my good friend Jim, who's been here every month for the
Ah,
last 3 years.
oh,
Can you
same
believe
to you.
that?
So, is this
Yeah,
3 years now?
3 years we're doing
Oh
this,
my
and
goodness me.
for love of nothing but helping other people with their taking that next step on their hobby journey. And thank you to everyone who submitted over the last 3 years. It's been a privilege to review all the wonderful miniatures,
And a
and
joy.
thank you for watching this video right now, or won't keep you any longer. So, first submission was from Stephen Banks. He's got this Malifaux Teddy thingy, uh, looking to do some distressed leather and fur, and trying to make the tongue look rough and clean transitions. So, I think this is a really nice piece. I really like the fur. I think it's got a cool like Care Bears kind of like feel to it. I love the color you've chosen, how loud it is, and the way you've got like this just like kind of irregular sort of scritching and scratching that really suggests the fur texture very nicely. And it looks, kind of like it looks like a teddy bear, which is, what it's meant to be. So great work on that. The kind of gem tongue stud looks really nice as well. It's got that cool like translucency to it. And the tongue obviously stands out really well against all the kind of cooler colors of the figure. Uh, tongue looks, I like the texture on it. I don't think it looks like super rough. It looks kind of like, you know, a bit like it's drying out. It's a bit manky in the end. So like that's kind of like your tongue when you've been hungover for a couple of days or whatever. I think it's a good look having that kind of texture stippling on it. It's got like the taste buds and stuff, which is great. And yeah, overall, I think your choice of colors is really nice and complementary to each other. Apart from these globs of drool at the end here, I don't know if they're like you're coming back to them or whatever, but they're very, very bright yellow green, and it's not really kind of anywhere else in the figure. And they're very solid. So like you'd think if they're drool, they'd be like translucent or whatever, and it's spit. So like, why would his tongue be all red, but then like the gobs of spit at the end are yellow? It doesn't really kind of work super well for me. I'd say you could give it like make it like pinky purpley dark color, and then you could have like a slight sheen to it, and that'd probably work a little bit better. Um, Personally, I don't know if I would have just sanded those off. I have a thing against painting translucent things on models. It can just be very annoying at times. But yeah, I'd definitely kick it back to make it less of a standout feature there. The distressed leather is good, but it's a bit too evenly spread out everywhere. I think like it's quite random, but it's like random over the whole surface. Whereas if you think of like a leather jacket, it's going to be worn on like the elbows. Certainly, all these places where the chains are rubbing up against it are going to be more worn than others. But you just have it essentially randomly and evenly across, which is similar to what you did with the fur. But that makes sense in the fur because the idea there is it all has that texture, but we only see it in certain places. Whereas the leather jacket should have way more texture in certain areas and be fairly smooth and clean in others. Um, so you could look into doing that. And the chains, I like the NMM. It's very stylized and shiny looking. But I just had a little note that some places, it's only really when you look very closely at it, I kind of wonder whether there should be like a drop shadow under some of the links, like where just like you have like an edge, a dark line on them, but if it should extend a little bit more because the inside of the links is so dark black, and you're saying that's casting a shadow in there where you just can't see anything. But then under the link on the next side, it doesn't. On the lower side, it's not casting really any shadow of any real size there. Um, so yeah, that could be something for improvement. But again, that's getting kind of nitpicky. Like NMM is it looks good. It's selling quite well anyway, and the chains aren't exactly the most important part of the figure. So yeah, in general, I think it's a really, really nice piece. Great combination of different colors and patterns and textures and everything. Got that fun, kind of like disturbing, but also playful Malifaux feel down. So I'd say great work all around. Jim?
Yeah, he's fun, isn't he? Very different. Nice to see something that's not GW from time to time. So I agree with Matt about the distressed leather. Where these ridges stand up is a great place to pick it out. Um, so yeah, I think that was good advice. With the tongue, I also agree about the yellow globule, but also tongues just look they're wet, so put a gloss varnish on it. I think and that's a great way to make her big tongue look a little bit more realistic, because our minds, all whenever we see tongues, pretty much they're wet. So putting a gloss varnish on it, or trying to imitate that with just like a line of white, broken up white paint going down one side, also does a similar job. But great work on the texture, as Matt said. What else did I have? With the NMM, I think the contrast is good, the travel is good, but you could just smooth it out a little bit more. It's a bit rough where the transitions are, so just smoothing some of these out. And also, you don't need to go from black to white on every single surface. Just the metal in general needs to go from uh, white to black. So you could treat some of these as more like whole shapes rather than treating each facet of each link as its own shape, if that makes sense. So that could be like this bit is here is a little bit darker, and then the top side get brighter and brighter and brighter because the light's catching at the bottom. So all of these top edges here would be pretty much white, and then obviously the underneath of the links would be, as you've done here, pretty much black, and then just like a little bounce light from underneath, that sort of thing. But yeah, like I say, you don't need to take the full travel on every single link, I don't think. And yeah, smoothing out, as I said. And then finally, it's a good fur effect as well on the green. I just thought it would be nice if you could maybe bully some more shadow into it and just give it a little bit more shape to like the head. So like where underneath the ears, where like the shape of the head comes down underneath. What's in here basically is the same brightness as what's up here. So yeah, just try and bully some shadows into the green as well, and I think that would help his head stand out a bit more. But really nice, fun piece overall, Stephen. So thank you very much for that, and I hope you find it helpful. Moving on to John Adams, there were some comments here, wasn't there? Let me just double check.
Yeah,
There was.
I think it's grand. He had like a Space Marine in there as well, and I was just
Oh,
saying,
okay.
they're too different. We can't
Okay.
cover both. So he said focus on this one with I think it's Seamus from Malifaux.
Okay.
I'm guessing, or it's some very oddly similar Jack the Ripper type
Mm. No specific feedback was there, so we'll just dive in. So, lovely smoothness, beautiful colours in this. It's great temperature, warmth, and the cold side of it as well. So you've done a lot of things very, very nicely here. Obviously, it's a very old light, so it's casting that sort of aggressive, like halogen yellow light. And I think you've done some really, really nice things with this. Like the way you've highlighted her is a grand success, I would say. The face, the hair, her upper body, and the arms, and then like these deep shadows underneath, is all very, very nice. Um, Him, on the other hand, I don't think has been quite as successful for a couple of reasons. One, um, the light, it just seems to be like he's what he's wearing is not a particular color, if that makes sense. It's grey what he's wearing, or white, and the light is the only thing that's giving it any color. Whereas I'm pretty sure with this outfit he would have some pretty bold colors, and it's not really coming through what those colors are. So like when you get down to the boots, like they're all blue, the same as the pants. But is he wearing? Are these exactly the same color? Because boots obviously normally would be black or brown. The pants could be black or brown. They're coming out very, very blue because of the moonlight. But the body isn't really reading as any particular color affected by the yellow light, if that makes sense. And it seems to be as well. I mean, it's a complicated thing to do two light sources, obviously, but the yellow light here and then you've got orange light here, is that because that's the color of the thing, or is that because that's the color of the light and it's getting weaker and it's obviously moving more into those red tones? It's a little bit hard to read like that, because then when you look at her dress, that's in the red tones as well, so it's not quite coming across what color his clothes actually are. I get it's reading as a black hat for me, but his jacket and his pants and his boots aren't really coming across. The other thing, which I thought was a little bit strange, is the pool of light on the floor. Like there's no light whatsoever on the floor down here, where the directionality of this light should be casting more of a pool, I would say, around them on the floor, rather than this tiny little bit here. That's very direct light. You've got this pool here directly underneath it, but it's also affecting his hat, which means the light is coming this way, which means that it would be coming down here, and there would be some light pooling on the floor as well. Obviously, they'd be casting a bit of a shadow on it. So those are the main things really. But this is very critical advice because it's a very difficult technical thing that you've tried solidly, I might add, to pull off. And yeah, like I say, this section, which is where we want to be looking anyway, on her is. I mean, I'd love to see some more angles of this, to be honest, and see how accurate my advice is. To be fair, but yeah, like smoothness of paint, the colors that you've used, where the shadows are, all that is all really, really strong stuff, and a great execution on the dual light source, hot and cold. So yeah, overall, really, really good. Just a few challenges on the reading of colors. What you can do is infuse some of the yellow light with the actual base color of what this was, and use that as your sort of your midtones, and then use sort of warm highlights to bring it up, and cold shadows to bring it down. It'd be really nice. But yeah, that's. I hope that's helpful, man. I'll pass you over to Matt now.
Yeah, all good advice all around. Tricky thing to do. Very similar opinions on my end. Like this light on her face, it's effectively a white light, but then it kind of dies into this orange, yellow, and then orange in like a sort of sporadic way. Like one of the things that really stands out for me is like his hand is like completely discolored yellow by the street lamp, but then her skin isn't discolored completely yellow, even though it's further away. And then she's also wearing this kind of like glove thing, which is yellow, I'm guessing. And that makes things confusing as well because I'm looking at his cravat and I'm like, is his cravat yellow and his outfit is orange? Or, it's very hard to tell where the actual like local color is here. So just have to think about that as well. Obviously a light source like an incandescent lamp, it is going to be, even if it's yellow, like I'm under a yellow light right now, but it looks white because your eyes adjust like for color balance and that kind of thing. And you've already got kind of relative blueness. So you could have less of the kind of color being influenced by the light in places. Like on his face, you've only got like a teeny sliver of actual skin tone in there. But I think that would really help pop him out a lot. And I'm not 100% sure why so much of his face is in shadow. Just looking really closely at the angle, like I get like if here was in a shadow, but you have like the front of his cheekbone, like right beside his nose, but he's kind of facing like more or less into that light, and like it's lighting up his collar, which is angled pretty much away. So, and even if it's not 100% realistic, just put it there because it'll make things read a lot better for us. And because sometimes it just gets quite confusing when you're dealing in kind of not monochrome, but like the way you painted the two light sources just made everything kind of like it's a blue scale and then a yellow scale. But you to have some of the true color in there of some of the features that would really make it easier for us to tell what is being influenced by the light and what actually is that color. Which I think Jim actually just said all of that. So, hopefully that helps solidify it. Thanks for submitting, John. Just going to move up onto Big Mac Morker. Doing another cool kind of Borderlands E, not as much. Kind of goblin slash orc lady here. Added secondary reflections on the scabbard and the crossguard. Just try to improve the eyes. Very, very nice. It's a 52mm scale. So, Marge. Yeah, I wasn't sure whether you made her hair blue because of Marge in the sentence, but if that's the reference, it's good anyway. But yeah, it's a really, really expressive piece. I really love the eyes, the face. Like, it's really kind of telling a story with this, like, she's picking up this sword, but she looks all nervous about it. And it's very, very stylistic, which I quite like. Even down to like the way the base is almost, it's like, is it just flat and painted, or it's relatively very flat anyway. And it makes it have this whole kind of like storybook charm to it, which I like a lot. And your selection of colors is very nice and harmonious. You got a lot going on, but it's all like it's got this bright, cartoony poppiness, but there's nothing that's like jarring or garish looking at all, which is very, very good. I like the way you have a kind of a natural skin tone, like inside of her ears and her nose and her elbows and that kind of thing. I think you could have a little bit of a sort of transition there because it kind of goes quite abruptly, especially on the nose. It's like green and it's like whoop, skin tone. Um, so if you had something where you did very light filters of like a red on the transition area, just to show. It'll add some to the skin. It'll add some to the pink, the green as well. And then similarly on the inside of this ear, just like very light little touches, and it'll affect the two different tones a little bit differently. And I think that would just kick it up a little notch. Um, I think the fabric looks really nice across her chest, but not quite as good on her back. It looks like, I think on the chest, you've hit this really nice sweet spot between doing this kind of dark lining and outlining and that kind of thing, and also showing the volume through like like area highlights. Whereas the back looks a little bit more like just kind of like two tone, and then the black lines on top of it. So I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it's just something I picked up on. And then the NMM, it's kind of hard to comment on because it's very stylized. So, it's how realistic, like, what does that even mean in this case? Uh, Personally, for me, I think there's certain areas you could just pop the highlights a little bit more, like the center of the kind of like rounded pieces near the crossguard of the sword, especially in the back view, and then like down in the scabbard has this like cutaway at the tip bit. It's called like a chamfer or something. And it's got this like U shape, and that could have like a really nice white highlight there, like just to call out that little shape to it. And you can also, if you wanted to, look into using like really a bit of to get saturation up if you wanted to look more kind of look cartoony as well. You can use like a laser yellow, like a really, really bright yellow green, and glaze that in your like set, not quite the highlights, like keep the highlights white, but just before that. It'll make it look even brighter. Or you can even use like a fluorescent yellow, just look right before the white. And that just, it doesn't look like the way real gold looks, but it looks really good for that kind of like super shiny, like comic book almost kind of gold. I think Angel Giraldes does a video where he does that on some sort of turtle man or something that you could probably look up. But it's a really nice looking piece altogether, I have to say. I really, really like it. And it's great to see, all of these cool techniques that you tried out in your orcs, but applied in a bigger scale with like more refinement and a better kind of canvas for you to show off all the skills that you've been picking up over this last while. Jim, over to you.
Yeah, it's lovely, dude. Really nice. Say it every time we see your pieces. But the refinement is just continuing on month by month, so it's wonderful. Uh, Seeing you pull back the black lining, particularly, it's really really nice in this one. I love as well how you've called out the shape of like the hamstring tendons in the back of the knees. I thought that was a really really nice way of doing it. So usually it's a little bit more sort of random, flicky flecky, and up on the edges, but I love how you've actually given the body a little bit more shape with it here. That's awesome. So I just thought maybe you could do that a little bit as well in the arm, just like where the tricep is. You get kind of like an L shape, just a little one there to show, like when you're gripping onto something nervously, you're kind of tense, and if that muscle's tensed, it pops out. So a little opportunity for a little bit more detail there, but everything Matt said stands. I think the NMM looks tremendous for the most part, really really nice, but yeah, could just push the highlights a tiny little bit, and then it looks like there's interference color from the ground. It looks like there's a slight green glaze going on in there. So if it is there, superb, maybe just push it a little bit more, but if that's a trick of the camera, then go for it. I think a little bit of interference color there, and the same to be said like on the cross guard. It looked like there was an opportunity for a little bit of bounce from the blue hair just to be showing up in the shadow of the underside of the cross guard. If that makes sense. See, it looks like there's a little bit there, but if that is it, then I'd say just refine that a little bit more and make that a bit more noticeable, because it's very very subtle as it is. Um, but yeah, stunning stuff, and especially at this minute scale as well. Like you look at the size of some of these freckles here; these are fractions of a millimeter. So the accuracy, the brush control that's there, that is awesome. So good work, Big Mech. Thank you very much, and see you next month, hopefully. Kelsey Elizabeth now, with I think a Dark Angel. Yes, a Dark Angel. So 2 weeks of work. Sorry about the toddler. This happens to me all the time as well. I know your pain, and I'm sure Matt does as well. Yes. So new technique was used on the sword. Overall happiness. Okay, cool. Yeah. So on the most part, it's really good. Nice and clean. You've got good transitions in stuff. Everything's separated pretty well. I think the red of the wings on his helmet could use a bit more travel. To be honest, just trying to find a better picture of it. I think this was the best one, yeah. So a little bit more edge highlighting would be cool on that. And speaking of edge highlighting, it looks like you might want a sharper brush, to be honest, because you have the right idea in where the. I mean, I'm looking at the robes here on these assistants. I don't know what to call them, servitors, mongs, not sure. But you've got sort of the gradient of color moving up the scale, but it's just not sharp enough really to sell particularly sharply. So I think new brush might be in order. If not, then just try and refine the amount of paint that's in the brush a little bit, perhaps, and just to try and get some sharper lines. Flow aid helps a lot with this. So does retarder, which stops the paint drying as quickly. If you didn't know that, if you did, then forgive me. But those are really good tools to use when you're doing fine lines. And it would only be for like the really, really high highlights you'd need to get super, super sharp on it. The rest of the time, you're just using the edge of the brush. But either way, it just looks like these edge highlights are a bit on the thick side, to be honest, for the robes. But I do like the color, and I do like where the placement and stuff is. So there's that. With the sword, it looks like you've kind of gone for where's the picture? Like a blue glaze on it. But I've from this angle, from what we're seeing of the sword, it is kind of all still the same color. So I'm not sure what the technique or the effects that you were quite going for was, but the way it's coming across in these pictures is it's basically blue, and then you've got white or silver highlights on it. That's it. I mean, it does look like there's a slight gradient there, like from the dark to the light, but I'd say it's either it's not coming across very well in the pictures, or you need to up the contrast quite significantly. It shows up a little bit better on this side, how you've got this nice saturated sort of seafoam green or something, and then the opposite brightness on that side. So forgive me, it might just be that the pictures are sort of blowing it out, but it does look like you've got the right idea, it's moving in the right direction, but just exaggerate that hue, get that contrast traveling a lot harder. Especially in metals, it's just got to be done. Then for the same thing applies for I mean, it's really hard to do a wonky like a wobbly banner, one that's not held flat. You know, one with ridges in it, like to do text on it. I think you've done a really, really good job of that. You've spaced it all out very evenly. Like they're very close to the edges as well, which is great. So there was another one I think on the back somewhere. Was it in shoulder pad or something? There was more freehand text, I'm sure. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, really, really great effort on that, and not doing like the really, really dark, like a black ink or whatever used for the text. It's too stark, so I think you've used the right color there. That's all really good. For the weathering on the cape, try and get some in there as well, because it looks like you've kind of dry brushed it or stippled it or whatever on the top ridges, but obviously it would collect inside these folds as well, and around the front of it as well. Just even that all out, that'd be nice. If you could do that, you can do the text across the purity seals as well, just fine dark brown lines going across the purity seals. That'd be a nice detail, which I think you're more than capable of doing, because the level of detail that you've got around the rest of the model, I think you're more than capable of doing that. So yeah, really, really great looking stuff. And the only other thing I thought maybe like just put something on the base a little bit more, whether it's moss or some purple lichen, skulls, you know, blood, whatever. Just something else, not just a grey rock. Would be nice. So yeah, super stuff overall. Thank you very much. Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, very nice. Good looking piece overall. Apologies if I repeat anything Jim says. I was being distracted by my 8-year-old who's over in the corner right there. So yeah, it's a very nice piece. Jim mentioned the base. So one of the things that you can do, obviously this is meant to be like tarmac, which is pretty like, boring looking material, but you know, you don't want anything to look kind of dull in your painting. So what I like to do is if you just get a bunch of inks like green, purple, brown, like skin wash, all of those, water them down loads, and then just blend them together randomly over that. It'll basically give it a bunch of colors, but it evens out as being gray, if that makes sense, because it's not all the colors will kind of blend together, and you won't notice that it's not gray, but it'll just look like a more interesting version of what it is right now. And then just on photos, if you're posting stuff in the future or here or anywhere else, you want to have a blank background, because the way you have it set up right now, like looking at the sword and that kind of thing, this is essentially what people do when they don't want AI to recognize what's in their photograph, is to put loads of random objects in the background behind it. So it makes it harder for us to kind of like judge what's going on for other people. So if you just like literally put in I'll find the website that I have a link to saved somewhere, especially for this moment. Where is
How
it?
breathtakingly well organized you are.
No, I'm actually not. Oh yeah, it is literally in my things. Corvusminiatures.blogspot.com, and they have these backdrops that literally you can print them off, and they look like those kind of 1980s family photo backgrounds that we all have, where it's like a weird gradient, and you just print it on a sheet of paper and put your mini in front of it, and it basically means that it'll read a lot more like what you see. The camera isn't like as good as your eyes at picking out individual objects and evening out all the different colors in an image. So having a blank background behind it can really, really help with that.
Was it
But that
Corvus,
obviously,
as in Corvus?
yes, that's it
Ah,
exactly.
cool. I've just typed
Corvus
it in. I've just
miniatures,
typed in here for my own reference as well, because that sounds
all one
really
word.
good.
Yeah, it's super handy. I have to print out a new one for myself actually. Um, but yeah, it's a really nice looking piece. So I look forward to seeing more in the future. Thanks for submitting. Next up, we got Alexis Bonaire, long-time submitter, always brightening up our month with this wonderful
Literally.
female warrior here. And you won it for a competition and just general advice. So yeah, really, really striking looking piece and very, very well rendered. I really love the patterning on the leopard print kind of clothes, and the extreme contrast and the kind of feeling that she's in a very warm environment, like a savannah, and everything is like yellow and there's this sun beating down from above. You've really, really captured that. So I have a few little kind of things that sort of seemed a little bit off to me. So for example, on her like right thigh, you have this very circular kind of highlight up at the top of it, like in a crease. It kind of feels like why would it be that shape when her leg is in that shape? Like you could stretch it out a bit more, make it more linear, kind of like the highlight that's lower down. And then her abs could maybe be picked out more, because one of the things is her face kind of looks like there's like she's like I don't know, under a tree, and there's a break and there's like a spotlight on her face, but then her chest and legs look more like she's being lit from like in front, if that makes sense. And I think I'm fine with like either of those. Um, but like if you want it to be like really like her face is so well lit up, I'd probably pick out less kind of lower down. Or if you want it to be more like the idea is that she's being fully lit from above, I'd pick out like just a tiny bit of like the top of her abs and like that line in the middle. And that would be about it, really. Like you've done a really great job with the musculature. There's even like veins and stuff in there. So the skin in general looks very, very strong. Um, the gold is very good. This is a rare example of like the gold is so nice, and I'm like, don't put a free hand over it because it looks that good already. It's got that lovely warm tone. It's got that like a radiant look to it, and it looks, exactly like polished bronze or almost gold, really as well. But I was kind of felt like her armor over on her right hand side is a little bit too bright, maybe. Especially considering like when you look at her, like her whole body looks kind of like it's being lit from this way. So her side is in shadow, but then her arm is like super brightly lit and like from above as well. And it's not, and it kind of works. It's the whole way down to like her arm, like her wrist. I feel like that should at least trail off and like give you a line that's kind of going up to her face, and then her face should still be the brightest bit because that's what you kind of want the focus to be on. You could do like different tones in the gold here to show that it's like a different environmental lighting or whatever. Um, but I just felt it's a bit too bright in terms of like attention, and it's very yellowy, if that makes sense. Where it's a bit it's stylized, and I don't think it necessarily needs to be as much in this particular context of this piece. Um, it could be a bit more like an ochre tone as opposed to that really bright yellow gold on that part anyway. And then, yeah, I really like the kind of like upwards light you have on her swords and on the back of her shield. But I feel like maybe you could have a bit more of that in a few places. Like on the inside of the shield in particular, there's like rim that is pointing downwards. It seems like that would definitely pick that up. And then maybe even if you were touching up the bracer then like on her forearm on the right hand side, it would kind of make sense that that's like facing towards the ground or whatever is creating that red light coming up from onto the swords. Um, oh yeah, and then the last thing was I kind of felt that like she almost looks, obviously it's meant to be extremely bright lighting, but the photos almost look overexposed, if that makes sense, because it's so bright, and especially like up at her head, you got this highlight where it kind of bleeds in between the headband and her forehead, which makes sense for like a glary kind of thing. But I feel like maybe you could just have a little smidge of dark line under there just to separate the fabric, because like the fabric should be casting like a pretty strong shadow, because like that's why she's wearing it on her head, and just to separate out. So when we look at it from a glance, it's really clear where her forehead ends and where her headband thingy begins. But overall, it is very nice looking. Really makes me think of like certain like pieces of artwork, like fantasy art. I've seen like loads of this kind of image, and it just looks like again like a piece of art, but in 3D. So great work. Good luck in the competition, and I'll pass you over to my friend Jim.
Who hasn't got much left to say, to be fair, because this is A, awesome, and B, that was very comprehensive advice. Yes, the only challenge really for me is the hyper yellowness of the gold on this side, and why is it so bright compared to her body? So either darken this down or brighten her up, to sort of, or a bit of both, just to bring them in line with each other. But otherwise, this is really stunning work. I think the gold that's the most successful is the shield, which is 11 out of 10, perfect. And for some reason, these little bits of scale here that are underneath, like the belt buckle thing, that just, I think this gold sells better than this gold. That more ochre peanut buttery sort of tone to it. Maybe it's a slightly different style of gold, and you've done that deliberately. Who knows? But if you did want them all to look the same, then I think personally this is the way to go over the like hyper saturated yellow. Swords brilliant, lighting brilliant, leopard print amazing, texture folds and stuff on the fabrics immensely brilliant. Details in the hair, bangles, separation, eyes, just all stunning. So yeah, amazing. Good luck for the competition. You're very capable of winning it with this. I should think I have seen less good pieces win competitions. So good luck to you. Let us know how you got on. On to Joseph now. Been a while since doing this. Since the Vince days. Very good. But hopefully we can be as helpful as Vincey Vu. So had a really good time painting this. Also going to the Squidmar Open. Nice, very good. So no particular point of focus. Just tried to push it further in general. So a few different things. So really nice. I love the skin. You've got some really nice soft transitions, which is so important for female skin. Great run of the gamut in the metals as well, and the fabrics. Lovely separation for the most part, and also I love the limited palette as well. It's very limited scheme. It's probably got a particular name which I can't recall. But yeah, overall, really nice to begin with. So a couple of things. I would actually push the highlights a little bit further in some places. So up to like the ice yellow or dawn yellow sort of range, just a little bit further. I'm not saying like go crazy. And also pick out the under. Sorry, yeah, the underneath, like the topward facing surface of the belly button. There's always a little highlight running there. And down the abs as well, the alba, there's always, if she's got really defined abs, which hers look pretty defined, there's usually a little sheen highlight that runs right down the middle of that shadow that you've got going there. So really, 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 really picky, that one, but this is competition, so that's what you get. I love what you did with the eyes and the lips. They look very, very like there's lots of life in them. You know, color in the lips, color in the cheeks. The eyeshadow that's going on is really good, but I would just smooth it a little bit along this, well, at the top of the cheeks. It's a little bit splodgy in some places. So yeah, just, I mean, I don't think that's like deliberate, like patterning or something. I think it's supposed to be like a smoke effect on the eyes. So yeah, just smoothing out that little line around there would be really cool. Oh, my mouse is having a mare. What's going on there? Hair looks really good. I love the halo sheen that you've got going on there. That's beautiful. And then a secondary one, like right in the parting of the hair. That's all world class. Really, really awesome. The texture on the fabrics, I would glaze that back a bit. It's a little bit too stark, if that makes sense. There's a lot of it everywhere. So I would just glaze that back and make it a little bit less abrupt. What else did I have? The sword. Sorry, Matt, could you mute? I'm getting some feedback from your side. Thanks, man. The sword is really good in like the color run, but it seems very shadowed on both sides. So like I get why this one would be darker with the interference colors coming from the fabric, but I think this side, which is more exposed to the light, you could broaden those highlights out, shrink the size of the shadows. You can still have the same sort of run of color, but I just increase the size of the highlights across the whole thing. Just make it that much brighter, especially this top edge here. Just have that pretty much a highlight, just running from like 1 being your highest highlight, running back down to like 3 to the mid-tone, and then back up to 1. It doesn't need to go all the way down to 5 on this top edge necessarily, I don't think. And then for the red, like the red metal is again a nice run of color to it, but it's kind of got very, very random placements on it. So you've kind of treated each individual segment of the armor as its own shape and then tried to make an interesting light pattern on it. Whereas what you can do, which looks a lot better, is take the entire arm as one shape. So you just have a great big highlight running down this edge, and then it would fall to shadow, and then you get a secondary reflection down here, and then it'd be back into shadow. The same would be said for this section that's on the upper arm. So it would be brighter here, then it would have a shadow, then there'd be a bounce light, a second reflection, then a shadow, maybe even a third one, interestingly. So that's the sort of way you want to tackle these individual shapes, as opposed to many smaller shapes making up one bigger shape, if that makes sense, and having this like diagonal striation highlights to it doesn't sell as well. But well executed though, nice smooth blends and edges picked out, and nice run of color. That's all really, really good. So yeah, I think that's all I had. So I shall pass you over to Matt, but again, good luck with the competition, dude. Let us know how you get on, and yeah, all the best, Matt.
Yeah. Skin, absolutely stunning. Like really, really beautiful work there all together, and that's like one of the hardest things to do, and it's one of the biggest parts of this whole figure. So fair play on that. Um, agree with Jim on the NMM red. One of the things about it is if so, like I'm going to talk a little bit about the armor and her cloak, because again, if I was you, I would glaze over it to kick back some of that texture a little bit. Just because in certain areas it's so stipply, it looks almost like she's covered in like glitter. You're like, why her cloak wouldn't be that shiny and that crinkly, if that makes sense, for it to have so much texture to it. You're only really you can go up to a because one of the other things you can do is you can go up to a pure solid highlight on like the tops of the ridges, because they're all of the individual the little planes that are facing the light kind of blur together because they're reflecting light. But yeah, it's just a bit of a weird like kind of level. It looks like it's shiny, but it's also extremely rough at the moment. But that is a pretty easy fix. Um, and then the maximum highlight you have on the leather is actually higher than you have on the metal, which suggests that the metal is less shiny than than the like leather jacket. It's a bit weird. Like obviously it's red metal, but like if you look at a red car, the sun when it reflects off it is just white, because that's it's just reflecting all of the light at that point, and it's the midtones that are red, and then the shadows are actually black. So I would definitely put in some like pretty hard edge highlights, and as Jim said, think about the geometric shapes of things, like especially this big dome on her shoulder. There's no real reason it would have all these lines on it. It's going to have like one gradient up to the top. And then certain panels that are just facing small panels that are facing straight towards light can just be like solid, just solid one color. And it looks super realistic that way because that's is how it would really work. I do like actually, like especially on her left arm, this kind of semi-random more artistic kind of expression of just having almost looks like watery reflections running across it. That's got a real kind of cyberpunk feel to it, so I do like that. But I think you should also include some bold highlights to bring up the shininess and kind of again have an element of sort of realism in there as well. Not that it isn't realistic, but more realism. Um, her hair, her fringe looks like it goes really dark and then just stops here, which looks a little bit weird to me. Like obviously it's like kind of wrapping under, but like you'd expect like the ends of her hair to have some kind of highlight just to also distinguish it from the skin. You could also have like a little brim of highlight on her skin. Her forehead in general is a little bit like monotone, especially here. I think maybe her bridge of her nose there should be a little bit narrower, uh, especially on her right hand side. Um, which obviously, if I was a makeup artist, I'd be working on that. And then I'd just be mindful as well. Like it's really nice having this very harmonious, it's all red and blue color scheme. But just be aware certain areas, for example, like on her left arm, you have the red armor, and then you have the skin, which has this angry red tone to it, where it's like irritated from the implants. And then you have the kind of fur coming out of her jacket, which is also has this reddish tone to it. And that can make things a little bit hard to read as to where one object begins and something else ends. Um, so just think about where the color scheme serves you and where it doesn't, because you could just have she could have a very white, like a neutral, kind of rough on her jacket, and maybe the skin could be more like purple instead of red around there, just so that we can distinguish them right at a glance that this is where one material ends and the other one begins. But yeah, really, really great work. Not an easy figure to do at all. Like super good showcase of your talents. So I'm sure they'll appreciate that in the competition, and wishing you all the best in it. Um, yeah. Next one up, got Bilkins. First time in a while. Always good to see you back. You've got the Tree Man from Moonstone. A little bit of Moonstone. Super characterful. It's like Malifaux Plus in terms of whimsy. And what do we think of the bark tones and the overall compositions, weakness, strength, etc.? Okay, so this guy, I like the bark in that it's kind of quite grayish brown because trees are often are that color. Like they're not really like brown like the way kids would paint them. Um, and you've got this cool like purple shadow tone to it as well that makes it creepy and gnarly looking. But I think maybe too much of it is purple because it looks like in certain areas it's actually purple as opposed to it being a shadow color that's like just how we perceive the darkness as being more colder. Especially because it's brown, that's neutral, so the purple stands out quite a lot against it. And also, if you look at the scene that you have him in, the lighting is very like warm and natural, and it's kind of weird that he has all these purpley shadow areas, but like this leaf has a little bit of purple in it maybe, but it's not like the underneath of all these mushrooms and stuff is purple. Like it's not like there's a purple fill light. So I think you could just tone the purple back a little bit, reclaim some of the kind of neutrally browny bits for him. And then I'd also look into increasing the contrast by having bits of the wood be like more brighter and more saturated in the kind of yellow brown or just like bone kind of looking area. Like if his face, like if you imagine the bark was stripped off around his teeth and stuff, where you'd have like the white wood showing through, and that, and then like on his fingers as well, you could have that, and it would just break up the whole area because being a figure made of all one material tends to just look a little bit. There's less for us to look at, and it's harder to pull off the kind of what we want to see in a figure. So that's just some ideas for you. I think he's quite cool looking. I do like all of his little buddies and this nice little scene that he's in with the mushrooms and like his little like cat that's sitting on his head. And generally, I'm a big sucker for evil trees in general. It's like one of my favorite things in fiction. Like, imagine a tree, but evil. Like, what's a tree gonna do to you? But this one looks like he could mess you up pretty bad. So I like that a lot. Jim?
I'm not familiar with Moonstone at all, but this is really, really cool, fun looking dude. Um, I think the bark is a tremendous success, to be honest, because what's one of the most uninteresting things to look at when you go outside? You have a whole wide world of interesting things to look at, and for me personally, it's a brown bark of a tree. It's a pretty dull thing. So to make a feature of it with a, I mean, how big are these guys, dude? I mean, the 1 cent thing, what's that, what, 32 scale?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think they're even smaller than Malifaux.
28,
They're like
mate? Maybe?
28 millimeters, something like that.
Well, I
Not
mean,
big anyway.
nah. So with this level of detail going on at this scale, it's just awesome. It's immense. I can't point you in any direction to make this look any better. To be honest, I think you've nailed it comprehensively, which is not very helpful. But I mean, I just literally everything I've written is all just positive. So the little details of splashes of color that you've got to kind of balance it out. So blues in here, blues down there, tiny bit of blue there, orange cat, red mushroom. How it's. I mean, I tried to make out what it said on this sign that's being held by this. I don't know, some sort of pixie or fairy which has perished on his back. That would be cool if you could read that, I suppose. I mean, I can see that there's letters there, but I can't make out what they are. But again, at this scale, we're talking what, millimeters, fractions of millimeters. The tone that you've got and like the texturing on this skull as well is outstanding. It's really, really good. So yeah, just a triumph all round, really. To be fair, really, really love looking at this. I'm sorry I can't be more helpful. You've not been back for a while, and yeah, I've got nothing constructive to say. This is just really, really good stuff, Bjorken. So thank you, and please come again. And then moving up to Adam, was a little bit late, but never mind. So entering this into another competition, South Warlords, later this year. Just looking for a little feedback on it. Again, I don't know how helpful I can be because the birds themselves, dude, look tremendous. Very, very good. I was very impressed with this. The only thing that really slapped a little bit was like the definition of the black lines. They're a little bit fuzzy against the red. So maybe you could do another color on each side of it, like white, just to kind of separate them very, very clearly from the red, if that makes sense. That's about all I've got. The gemstones look awesome. The green on the cockpits is really, really good as well. That's a tricky thing to try and make sell. The red, the very, very light weathering on it, the edge highlighting, the like purpley shade tone to it. It's so smooth. All the panels are well defined. The other thing you could possibly argue is we probably shouldn't be seeing muzzle burn on the exhausts because they are in flight. So you'd more expect to see some sort of glow coming out of them. I mean, we don't have a picture of what they look inside, but from the side, that looks like cold metal that has been very, very hot previously, if that makes sense. But because they are in the air, that should be either glowing red or yellow or green or blue or whatever their fuel source is. I don't know. I'm not up to speed on my. Is this Eldar or Drakari? Eldar? Warp
We're
speed
all just
drives.
space elves.
Just
Let's be real.
space
You're
elves.
space elves.
Space elves, yes. So yeah, you could also maybe look into getting something printed to help these look like they're a little bit more in motion because they are obviously in motion because they're in the air. We can see that, but you've got static planes and a static base and a static backdrop, so you're not getting the kind of the dynamic that they are moving. So one of the moving on for like sorry leading on from the muzzle burn and having that painted as like, you know, glowing from being hot, maybe try and get something printed, some sort of exhaust smoke or some sort of like, you know, translucent print where you could, you know, have like a shape of some energy coming out of the back of them to make them look a little bit quicker, something like that perhaps. And then I mean, the base is the base, you've painted it to match the backdrop, it's, you know, not stealing attention from the birds, but there's not a lot going on there. But if it's a barren desert world which is green and devoid of anything helpful or useful or organic or anything like that, then it kind of is what it is. But it's all very, very static. So another thing I thought, I'm pretty sure you painted this backdrop. It's very, very cool. But maybe what I thought you could do was for some of the stuff that's in the foreground, like the smoke, is try and put a few like lines, white lines around the edges of things, like where the shape of the clouds is, and then just get a card and just slide it across to make it look like there is some motion in the backdrop. They are speeding past. Like the mountains and stuff that are in the background, probably not so much, but maybe a little bit coming off of those. And then obviously on the planet, nothing, because it's so far away, it wouldn't be having that effect on your eyes. But just to try and give it a little bit of dynamic motion to it, because like I say, there's very little that I think you could do to push the birds themselves. I think they're great, but yeah, just to try and get that visual interest between the backdrop, the model, and the base all tied together. Yeah, just some sort of blurry motion on the backdrop, I think would really help. But yeah, just a mad mental idea. It's not something I've tried before, to be honest. But yeah, at the very least, I'd say paint these as hot metal, not as cold metal that was hot previously. But good luck in the competition. It's really, really high standard of painting. So yes, please let us know how you get on, and I shall pass you now over to Matt.
Yeah, super well done planes. I can't even tell what scale they are. Like these could be like epic, they could be 40K, they could be anything. They just look like this is what they are, more or less. Agreed, lines could be a little bit straighter or like more distinct. Uh, I also kind of feel the canopies, like you could sort of emphasize them a bit more. Like look at it, like Battletech, they always do really cool canopies on them, or the way they do if you look at like an anime like Macross or is that actually called Robotech or Gundam or whatever? The way they try and show glass in that is it's like, you know, there's a particular style of doing it, but it looks really, really cool. And then I felt like it's hard to tell because we're only looking at it from one angle, but some of the gems look like the amount of them that's like bright colored is like almost more than half the way up, which depending on the angle the sun's hitting them at could be a little bit weird. So I don't know if this is for competition. I'd say it's in person, so it's just probably gonna be fine if you're looking at it from multiple angles and it works that way. But if it is just for online, you want to make sure that in this view everything looks like spot on because that's what you're gonna do. On the base in the background, the base, I was thinking it would be kind of cool if you could print so or get some teeny tiny figures, like in like 5 mil scale or whatever, who are like looking up at it, at the birds going past, or like gazing off in the distance to show that they are super high up and these are people like on top of a mountain off that we're looking at. That'd be pretty cool. And then on the backdrop, I'd be careful with your fog because you've obviously used like a roughy piece of paper as a stencil here, and that tends to accumulate the most paint towards the edge of the stencil. But just be careful. I'd say you need to come back in and maybe freehand a little bit in a few places because the way the kind of transparency and overlap of things, the layers of fog isn't 100% like true to life. Like especially if you look at the right hand side of it, and there's like two waves that are over each other, and it goes like white, and then it goes to transparent, and then it goes to white again, and it goes into transparent. But like which one of those is in front of the other one? Like we can't tell because we can see one of them through the other, and it could be one way or the other way. Whereas obviously, if two overlapping fog banks, if one is in front of the other, everything below this one. So if this is the one in the back and this is the one in the front, everything below this is going to be wider because it's now two layers of fog. If that makes sense. And you can just again in the like center where you have overlapping ones, go back in with the airbrush, just do a little bit of like a normal, like a circular highlight on top of that, just to give us that rolling volume, so it doesn't look like flat planes of of mist. You can tell I've done space and I've done fog with the airbrush before. It's very fun. Um, and yeah, this is incredibly nitpicky, and I wouldn't change anything about this for your piece, but I don't think your planet is entirely circular. Yeah, it's either not completely a circular template, or the shadow on it is asymmetrical, so it's making it look like it's like longer than it is wide across. Uh, and like the way like the shadow should wrap up more on the left hand side, and the whole thing should just look a bit more like spherical. And also, like this is completely an aside, but the you wouldn't actually have a shadow under here at all if this is the daytime. Because if you see the moon in the sky during the day, the dark parts of it, like if it's a crescent moon, they're sky colored because it's not emitting light, but the sky emits light. So it should just fade away into green completely. Um, but I think for this piece, doesn't matter. It's a backdrop. Who cares? It looks cool. Best of luck in the competition. Thanks a million for submitting. I think it's a really wonderful little piece. I think the composition, like the fact that it's the two like planes in the sky in this scene, like it's just a really wonderful setup, and I think anyone who sees it is going to appreciate that. I think having them partially off the backdrop is also really nice because it makes it look like they're extending forward and back in space. Uh, and it looks like a lot of thought went into getting them to overlap correctly and look nice as a single sort of air diorama, which you wouldn't see much of. So yeah, that's it. Thanks very much for watching through the review. If you want to give us any feedback about how we do these, feel free to drop a comment below. And if not, we'll see you next month.